I'm excited. Things are growing, and I've been in so many different places in the last couple of weeks, from Dubai to Rome to Minneapolis. And it's very exciting to see how the world of cybersecurity is evolving. We're running this prediction tour in which we're meeting a lot of CISOs. So I get to learn every day from very smart people, and it's fascinating to me. Maybe, Joshua, we haven't met before, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about you. I heard about a book. So tell me what we should know about you.
Josh Copeland. I am currently the director of cybersecurity at Crescendo AI. It's a customer experience platform that allows us to do amazing things using AI and helping people get the things that they need from the vendors that they're using. A background, I've been doing cybersecurity one way or another for almost the last 30 years. Did the first 20 of that with the United States Air Force, doing all kinds of cool stuff around nuclear weapons, which is a very niche field. Kind of moved from that when I retired in 2018 and started doing cool stuff with the federal government, moved to state government, worked with a couple of great companies, Bose, AT&T, General Dynamics. That's kind of led me where I am now. I'm also a professor of cybersecurity at Tulane University, teaching things like cryptography, enterprise architecture, around how we need to do things better, more efficiently, and ultimately do it in a way that gets us where we need to be without burning us out and making us to where we're spending too much money on things that don't give us good return on investment.
Excellent. Well, I'm the founder of BforeAI, but I'm not going to talk of BforeAI because I'm going to ask you. I know that you have met my team yesterday, and I'd love to hear what you got out of that meeting and maybe what you remember about what we do.
Yeah. What I found very, very intriguing about your product is the very proactive approach that you guys have on looking for things that would normally be things we would find after a breach occurred. And one of my previous roles were servicing one of our customers that absolutely had a ransomware incident. And when I was going through, looking through all the logs, researching the things, we looked at the ransomware website that they had sent them to, and we had seen that that had been registered 6 months before the breach occurred when they got the actual ransomware popped. And I had to look at the team and go, we know for sure that they were at least in your system 6 months ago because they're not going to go through the time and effort to register a domain with your name on it for a breach that they're not sure that they're going to be able to do. And, I thought it was very interesting that your product proactively goes out and looks for those kind of adjacent domains and can kind of proactively take those things down, and also let me know as a security practitioner that maybe I am being specifically targeted by a threat actor, and maybe I need to dial up my sensitivity and my controls a little bit. Maybe those things that we thought might have been false positives or just weird hiccups in the system really weren't, and we need to take a stronger look at that. So the kind of premise that you guys have of the pre-crime was definitely intriguing and provides a lot of extra value on the side of my part of the organization, because it's not just about doing the takedowns, it's about doing the takedowns before I get breached.
Absolutely. My team did a good job explaining what we do. That's always positive. But you hit it on the nail. When we started, the primary pain I wanted to resolve was not knowing what come next and living in that perpetual state of, unknown, nearly victim, because of detection, and then having to wait for the attack to start. And I think when I hear our customers today telling me that they feel like actor of their defense, and they, are now exercising that active defense model that you are defining with the preemptive actions that we do. It's really that turning. So anyway, we'll get more into the philosophy of this in a moment. But tell me about the book.
Book was something that occurred almost by accident. I had been posting online for the last 4 or 5 years, basically a series of posts that I've called unpopular opinion. And they're kind of my takes that don't always line up with what we see all the time on all the various social media platforms, where everyone's like, everything's great in cybersecurity. We're awesome. We're doing all these wonderful things. While I do think that we are great and we do a lot of wonderful things, I still think there's a lot of room to grow from a maturity standpoint. as well as just from taking care of each other standpoint. So after about 4 years or so of posting this kind of content out, I had a couple people poking me and prodding me saying, you really should put that in a book. So I kind of sat down and over the course of, 6 or so months, kind of formulated how I'm going to put that in a book and kind of here are the things I think are wrong. Here are the ways that we can fix it. Here are the psychological reasons of why the things that we have are the way that they're working. And here's the kind of long-term strategy of how do we get better and build it back the right way instead of kind of the cycle that we're in now where we do stuff and then we wait for a reactive approach to whatever the thing is. And then that causes a lot of cycles, a lot of grind, a lot of burnout, which in turn causes us to wait again after that next round and kind of have that vicious cycle of burnout that we don't really need and that we're kind of inflicting upon ourselves.
So I often share when I was a kid, my mother used to work at the emergency room at the hospital, and she would bring me there after school because we didn't have someone to look after me in the afternoon. And I think there is a very interesting similarity, but also difference between what we do as security teams, in that constant waiting mode for the next attack. That I was in Naples in the south of Italy, pretty dangerous time at the time, that I was young. A moment you could have a guy that had broken the leg playing soccer in the road. The next is somebody victim of a firearm because of mafia and whatnot, right? So it could be very scary. And to some extent, that's similar to security because we really don't know if it's a ransomware that's going to hit us in 10 minutes or a compliance requirement for the supplier, right? So, but at the same time, there is a very strong difference to me, and I'd love to hear your thought about it, is that people that go into being nurses and doctors in the emergency room, they do it for vocation. They do it, they sign the Hippocrates, agreement, and they study so many years to save people, and they're very empathic with them, et cetera, et cetera. I don't get the same feeling in security. Most of us still come from that IT background, technical background, for the love of the coding and the command prompt. Do you think that is a reason why there is this burnout and challenges? Is that because, or what else have you found in your research, in your thoughts, that we should look at? And not spoiling too much of the book because we want people to get the book as well, right? So,
I think you're kind of spot on. We have created what I like to call a hero culture around cybersecurity, where it's put the people who come in at the last second and save the day after a breach occurs, and we put them on a pedestal rather than the folks who are doing good work day in and day out, doing the right things for the right reasons and making the right arguments. And when we have that kind of thing, we're incentivizing the wrong piece of the puzzle. We're making it to where I don't get to put my time, focus, and energy on the things that are going to be proactive, things that are going to make us better, faster, and potentially make us a more marketable organization to the folks that we're going to be our clientele. And we spend all our time going, okay, we had this bad thing occur. Now let's go fix it. We had this attestation done and we have these write-ups. Now we have to go fix those things. And by doing that, we've kind of made it from doing it for the love of doing cybersecurity to I'm doing it because I like the hits of dopamine that I get when I'm the hero.
You make me think of a very large customer that is in the automotive sector. And lately, a large automotive manufacturer has had a big challenge in the UK. It's on the news.
Yep.
And should be celebrating our customer that is not being hit because we know they're being targeted by the same attack and they were not hit for reasons. And instead, everybody's talking about the victim and not the others that have been able to fend off, right? So I think I like I say often also in my conversation, we have great firefighters in this security team in our industry, but nobody loves fires, and that should be, our focus should be on avoiding the fires, not being good at shutting them down, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at it from what's the next step, how this can be changed, have you thought about potential other ways that we can help or should focus on to kind of get out of this continuous loop of detection, response, and we're stuck into that firefighting process.
Yeah, a lot of it comes to taking a step back and looking at how are we building systems? Are we building systems for detection and response, or are we building systems to be resilient to where when something occurs, we're able to either not be affected by it or be able to rapidly recover? I'll give the example. Recently, we had the issue with AWS in the US East region that took down a massive swath of the internet. Like, that caused a lot of churn, a lot of responsive capabilities for organizations. And ultimately, that's a failure of bad design. You did not have good design that was resilient. You said, oh, yes, I do have backups, but oh, by the way, they're stored in the same, availability zone. Or, yes, I have redundant systems, but all of them are in the same availability zone. So when that availability zone goes down, so does all of my system. I'll give you an example. My middle daughter is a junior in college. She's studying cybersecurity. And like many college students, she has a side job that she does to get some little extra cash. And she was a manager at a restaurant. When that event occurred, they had to actually shut down the restaurant because their point of sale system was cloud-based and based in that particular AWS region. And their vendor did not have redundancy and resilience built into their system. So they could not literally take orders or process transactions. Essentially, their cash register was broken.
Wow. Okay.
So
that's very interesting. You see, that makes me think, in our end, what happens? So we use 6 cloud providers to support the infrastructure to collect the data that power our models. And the orchestrator that we have built is meant to do load balancing across the 6 based on some rules. And what happened in that occasion, as we have more than 300,000 virtual machines on the 6 cloud, there were probably around 25 to 50,000 running at the moment that the AWS issue came up. The orchestrator just rebuilt it on the other 5 clouds, load balancing to them, right? And indeed, nobody noticed anything. Of course, aside our AWS bill that went down a little bit for a day, that is always a good thing. But I think I like thinking that basically you shift, the famous shift to left, right? So you spend more energy before the breach occurred. Now, this is very, very much before into design. We are more focused on, can we even create deterrence, create preemption solution that avoid the attack to happen? So we are maybe still left, but not so left as the design. But how does this get rewarded? Because, sometimes, I speak with customers, say, Luigi, how do we present the ROI of a preemptive solution if the attack doesn't happen?
Yeah, and that's the classic issue that you have in IT and cybersecurity. Everything works. What do we pay you for? Versus nothing works. What do we pay you for? Mm-hmm. And that's where we have to get better at storytelling and translating the bits and bytes that we deal with day in and day out into things that our board members actually care about. How do I, by adding in security, make us a more marketable product? How, by adding in security, do I make the processes that the operations side have to do better, faster, more secure? How do I enable my business side? And articulating that is an area that largely folks in IT and cybersecurity have been historically really, really bad at. We promote folks who are very, very good, and I'll use the term widget makers, but the best widget maker is maybe not the right person to talk to the board of how do we make widgets and how does that widget impact the board. So we have to kind of build that additional skill set of talking business and understanding what the role is in business. Because yes, every cybersecurity professional wants an unlimited budget with all the tools and all the shiny whistles. And
also as a vendor, we would like that.
Absolutely. But ultimately, we have to be able to say, this is what we're doing to move the needle for the business. And if I can do that successfully, I don't have the budget issues that other organizations have. And I'm able to actually have good conversations with my peers that are, my other director or C-suite executives in my organization because I'm building it back to the things that they care about. They don't care about CVEs. They don't care about CVSS scores. They don't care that this is a actively exploited in the wild. What they care about is, what does this mean for my part of the business? And that's where, to your point, I can go and look and say, this is our business. Here are other people in my business realm. Here's the attacks that have happened against them. Now, I can assure you that we're being targeted by the exact same people because we're in the same vertical.
Sure.
We're a
The spray and
equal,
praise.
like we're a equally, juicy target to them. The difference between us and that vendor that got, or that competitor that got breached, is these are the things that we did proactively to prevent that. Here's how we've made it to where we don't have that operational breach. Like your example, the automaker in the UK who's been down for over a month. If I'm an automaker in any organization, I'm absolutely looking at that and going, okay, going to my IT department, so my cybersecurity department, and saying, what are we doing to make sure that we're not that? And that's the story that we need to tell, and be very proactive about it, because not everyone's going to have the massive, down for months breach, but you're very easily to find your near peers who have had small breaches, who have had, data exposed, stuff that's out on the dark web, and have those conversations and go, these are the things that we're doing to prevent this from occurring. And because we can show you that, we're not actively being exploited, we're not actively seeing our stuff on the dark web, that's our return on investment, is because it's brand reputation. It's the ability for us to look at our customers and say, not only are we doing the right things, we're doing it better than our competition.
You make me think, 5 years ago when I started BforeAI, my hunch was that in this industry, we do guardrail to guardrail. And so that early talk of assuming breach and detect and respond was going to result in everybody become victims, because everybody would have had to detect an attack that had already started. Otherwise, how you can possibly detect it? And unfortunately, I've seen that, call it Cassandra prediction, realize, right? So all the expenses now, we are heavily shifted into this reactive world. Prevention has been kind of thiefened out of resources. And my take at the time was, okay, I'll build a solution before the attack, because we will be so in demand of a solution that rebalance the posture to a more preemptive, that we will have success. And interestingly, Gartner came out with one of their prediction. Actually, first of all, they came up yesterday with the top 10 trends for next year. Number 7 is shift to a preemptive security. So we're definitely going to have a nice year. But also they say that a couple of months ago, 50% of the spend in security in the next 5 years will shift toward left of boom activities. So I think, and we know that Gartner doesn't necessarily have a creativity, it's probably just gathering the feedback that their customer are providing them. But I'm, what you said actually made me think also something else, right? So I'm an, great passionate about driving more diversity in our workforce, in our security teams. I'm an ambassador of the Women for Cyber Foundation that is really about driving a more balanced workforce. And one thing that I'm always trying, we run a webinar interviewing some of those women talents that are doing fantastic in the security industry. And one of the things that strikes me is when the conversation goes on and on with them, rarely it veers toward the technical aspect of it. It's generally more toward the human aspect, the leadership aspects, the soft skill, if you want, curiosity and the likes. Do you think that part of the problem is also this, very strong kind of lack of diversity that we have at the moment? And is that one perhaps of the ways that we can kind of get out of this circle that in which we fall into?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it is something that I talk about in the book. Diversity in cybersecurity absolutely matters. Your perspective determines how you look at things. So I'm ex-military with a traditional college education, with the traditional certifications. If I only hired people who had my background, we're all going to look at a problem and see it exactly the same way. And we're all going to miss the exact same blind spots. I want people who are looking at problems from a myriad of different angles. So maybe I'm not going to hire somebody just because they have a, undergraduate degree in IT or cybersecurity. The best SOC analyst I've ever had their undergraduate degree in marketing, which you think about it and goes, what does marketing have to do with cybersecurity? And then I'll go, what's the core of marketing? Marketing is to get you to click the button. Now, granted, in their case, it's the button is swiping a card or clicking the buy button on your Amazon account. But what's the core of any social engineering? Get you to click the button. So those skills are exactly the same skills. Same thing with folks coming in from medical background. They're born and bred to do triage. Where do I have to stop the bleed right now? What's the most important thing for me to address this moment? And then rank order all the other things. That's incident response. How do I stop the breach from occurring and then go follow the steps back and figure that out? We put all kinds of what I think are silly barriers into folks coming into cybersecurity, require you to have a bachelor's degree, require you to have these 6 certifications. And I look at that and go, you're only hurting yourself as a hiring manager. Because one, why are you putting them on there? Is there an actual business justification for that? Let's say you are doing like federal government work and they have some really strict guidance that says you must have, at least a security plus, you must have at least a bachelor's degree. Okay, you have a business justification. If you're just hiring for a regular SOC analyst for a corporation, do they really need a degree to be a SOC analyst? Probably not. Do they really need anything more than maybe a security plus? Probably not. Yet you'll see job descriptions out there where they want a bachelor's or a master's degree with a CISP and 5 years experience, rather than having people who have the right curiosity, the right passion, they're able to ask the right questions and able to go find the right answers. You look back at early cybersecurity, and cybersecurity was built by the folks who were just curious. We built an entire industry in the beginning of folks who went, I wonder how I can do this, or this is how we built this. How can I make it better and protect it better? And we've gotten away from hiring based off of that kind of thought process and creativity and passion to, can I check these boxes that make it easy for HR, the recruiting team? And we really need to take a step back and look at, how are we writing job descriptions? Are you going out to, LinkedIn or Indeed or whichever site you want to and copying and pasting a job description you found somebody else? Or are you actually writing a job description that says, these are the things that this person needs to be able to do that I can use a year from now as a rating system for that person? If I'm doing that, great. I'm actually hiring for the right skill sets for the right talents. If I list 100 things that they aren't really going to do, I'm not hiring for the right skill set. I'm hiring for a job description somebody else wrote for another organization that has nothing to do with mine. And that presents problems for us because we're not getting the right talent and we're keeping folks who would be fantastic out by putting artificial barriers in.
And it's fascinating what you say. I'm a product of what you're describing. I was hired in my first real job as a tech support. Hotliner was called at the name. The guy taking the call and fixing problem over the phone. And I didn't have university degree. I had no formal education tied to computer, but I started when I was 40 years old tinkering with, MS-DOS and GW Basic, and then playing around, installing all sorts of things on computers and the likes. So they took a chance on me because they saw the passion, the curiosity, exactly what you are describing. But it's a bit counterintuitive, right? Because it is more comfortable for a hiring manager to say, oh, let's delegate to the guy that did the certification if this guy has the quality or not, right? So how do we stimulate, how do we kind of evolve the hiring managers and the leadership? Because ultimately they shift the paradigm, right? Do we just have to wait and everybody dies and the new generation come on board? Or do we wait for AI to be smarter and use other clues? Have you explored this in the book? Are there specific thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it starts first with conversations like this, where folks who are in the field and we're discussing what the root problems are. And the more we discuss it, the more it gets out there, the more it puts that seed into people's head of maybe I can change, the way I'm doing things at my level. Because ultimately, if you're the hiring manager, you have the final say of who gets hired. You might have HR, the recruiting folks who are trying to look for kind of the easier methods, but hold them to task to do their job and not do it the easy way. Don't take the easy way out because it's easy or it's comfortable. Do the thing that's going to make your organization better. Like, would you rather hire 3 people who meet the check boxes and are mediocre, or hire one person who's going to outperform those 3 people who you actually had to do a little work to make sure that you've hired the right person? And I guarantee you, when you start doing the math on it, the math is always going to be in favor of doing it the hard way up front and having the right person in the job. You can look at some workforce studies and say that the average cost to replace somebody is 30% of their annual base salary. I'm going to put out there and say a average IT salary is 100K, just because I like to use nice, easy numbers, because math in public is hard. And if I go 30% of that, it's going to cost me 30K to replace that person. Now, would I rather invest the time and effort to get the right person that I don't have the turnover, and invest that 30K that would cost me to hire a new person into retaining that person and upskilling them and getting better benefit and actually getting them to where they want to work for me, not because they have to, but because they want to? Or do I stick with what's we've been doing that has clearly not been working and continue that cycle? I can make the business case where it's going to cost me less money long term to hire the right person up front, even if it takes a little bit longer and I have to do a little more critical thinking in my hiring process rather than just saying, just give me the folks who have these check boxes up front.
Yeah, listen, I'm gonna do the devil advocate here because, of course, we're speaking between us, but I'm sure somebody in the audience will think about it, right? This conflict with what we are seeing in real life, where everybody want to hire more and more senior people ready to jump into the job, deliver value yesterday, being in office, not having any perk. Where are those organizations that truly will invest? Because one of the challenge is we have a number of very smart, educated, junior folks that are willing to come into the workforce, but they're getting bounced by requirements that say junior, but actually with 5 years of experience, or experience, but you need to have like 30 people team doing red teaming in the DoD or stuff like that, right? So how do we kind of break the mold? Because these young, passionate, curious people, they do need some break in, right? They do need some place where they can have a sandbox in which they can experience about these practicalities and then become senior, right? But if nobody give them the chance, and now with AI, there is even the question of will they ever have a chance, because AI may actually take those kind of entry type jobs. So how do we reconcile the two things?
Yeah, and that comes down to a lot of times the business case. Businesses want to hire mid-level folks for entry-level jobs, and there are some market forces around that where we're in kind of an economic decline. You're seeing tons of layoff in the tech industry, which means you do have, mid and senior folks applying for lower roles just to get a job. But when you look at it, you have to look at it, is that long-term and sustainable? Am I going to be able to keep folks and have continuity and grow the skill set that I need if I keep hiring nothing but middle and senior level folks? And the answer to that is it's not going to happen. You kind of have to do, smoke test and go, well, if I got rid of this one person and they're a single point of failure, how do I continue my organization? And a lot of that comes down to you have to build a enterprise that grows individuals, that I can take someone out of a role and move them someplace else and have someone immediately come up and be able to do that level of function. and do that in a way that doesn't impact your business either. And I will be very transparent. It's hard. It's hard to have those conversations because they go, well, I don't want to invest money into somebody who was then going to leave the organization and take the skills we gave them and go someplace else. And I kind of take the frame back to them and go, what happens if we don't train them and they stay? Like, you're going to have somebody who is not good that we're paying to do a job that they're not good at because we didn't give them the appropriate training, and we've just hurt ourselves. Anytime we provide training to somebody, we risk the chance of them losing them to another organization. But then the onus is on us to make them want to stay, to give them the opportunities for growth and give them a direct path and be very clear and transparent on how the organizations work and how we're going to develop you. And if you don't do that, yeah, you're going to have massive turnover. You're going to have problems hiring folks in. You're going to see the comments on Glassdoor where the place is horrible to work at. You know, it's all about building the right culture. And culture isn't just the things that you have in your company handbook saying these are our values. They're what you actually practice day in and day out.
So let me, I'd love to get your take on another topic, right? And we talked about curiosity as a key ingredient of the success of a security professional. And I think there is no doubt, right? No matter if you are in the SOC analyzing alerts, if you are in threat intelligence trying to derive attribution rules, ERC trying to figure out, how you shortcut the compliance and so on and so forth. I have two daughters that are relatively young, and I've been always kind of thinking, how do I create the condition for them to become curious? Because I really value that, right? And I come to the kind of a sort of a conclusion that you don't really teach curiosity. It's kind of somewhat innate, somewhat result of an environment in which you live, right? So I put them playing with Lego blocks and puzzles and, create all sorts of trickeries for games and stuff like that. So do you think curiosity is something that can be taught? Because, if they are 5 years old, 4 years old, you can do all these things. But if someone grows up, become 22, 23, come to the first job, they need to be curious. You want to bring them on board because they're passionate, but they're not curious. How do you develop that curiosity? Is it even possible?
I think you can't teach curiosity, but you can nurture curiosity.
Okay.
You can put them in positions where curiosity is something that is going to give them an advantage or give them kind of something that they value. So to your point with your kids, you put them in an environment where they have access to things that build curiosity. They go into elementary school, middle school, and they have access to things like a robotics program that allows them to go try things and, be curious. And the more you give people the opportunity to be curious, which also in turn means that you have to give them the opportunity to fail, because that's the stigma of curiosity is if I try something, I might fail. So you have to make it to where they can fail safely and feel safe that they're going to fail. And that will drive better curiosity in a cycle that not only takes their innate curiosity, but actually grows it and perpetuates it.
What you say actually resonates with me. Often in those prediction tools I was mentioning earlier, we speak with CISO about the future of AI for cyber and cyber for AI. And this topic of, junior jobs disappearing because AI will do it and the challenge of training people, etc. And what you say just now kind of click on me on AI is an opportunity because you can create sandboxes, you can create simulation environments in which an AI avatar is doing pen testing, and you have your junior employees, fighting back in the AI model itself, right? So with no particular impact on infrastructure or anything like that. So creating digital twins, working in simulation at a higher degree of fidelity than obviously what we can do now without, right? So I want to think that these new technology actually are going to be an augmentation for junior people. They'll have better tools. I'm actually very envious. Would have loved to have all this AI, goodness when I was 10 years old and learning MS-DOS and optimizing memory and things like that. So do you think, is that a way that we should look at it positively, or do you see more of a threat about it?
No, I use the example of the automotive industry. 70 years ago, when manufacturing robots first started hitting the market, people were absolutely terrified that it was going to take all the jobs out of auto manufacturing. It's 70 years later. We still have folks who work in auto manufacturing. And what the robots did was create an entire new ecosystem of folks who had to build, design the robots, and a whole other ecosystem of the folks who have to maintain those robots, program those robots year to year as they change the auto manufacturing. So is AI going to fundamentally change how we do cybersecurity? The answer is absolutely yes. Is it going to replace humans in cybersecurity? No, it's not going to replace humans, because ultimately AI will not testify in court for you and will not do a jail sentence for you. So there's always going to have to be a human who's making decisions, who is being held accountable. And the more you implement these AI tools, the more you have to have folks who are very, very smart, managing, maintaining, and guiding the AI tools to make sure that they're doing the things that we want them to do, not the things that we told them to do, which is very different things.
That'll be fascinating times. So we're approaching the time here for the end. I've been asking so many questions. You've been so kind of answering me. I am very curious, as you have seen. But do you have questions for me? What other topics you think we should investigate?
I would really, you're a entrepreneur. You're somebody who's obviously growing a big business. What is your thoughts on the typical tech bro grind culture that is prevalent in our industry? And is it all positive? Is it all negative? Is there a mix? What are your thoughts about that?
Partly because I come from that background, I despise it. So one of my addiction when I was a kid, and then eventually when I had this first job of tech support, was putting all the cable in a neat, organization, right? I was really maniacal about cabling. And when I look back, I say, how much time I wasted on doing that, right? And it's an inordinate amount of time. And so I think there is an interesting search for control as we build our career in this industry. And you actually see it in how neat, when you have multi-screen setups and, folder setups and configuration of Yara rules and whatnot. So to me, there is somewhere a kind of a balance between a need to have self-confidence and maybe not there, and using these kind of behaviors to try and mask that fragility, if you want, somewhere. And so I actually think that one of the way that I've learned, through experience to improve myself is to actually accept the fragility. It goes back to the point of resiliency you were mentioning earlier on, right? It's no point trying to show you that you're always organized and set up when it's not true. Do show your limits and know them, and just don't play around them, right? Just stay in your strengths, right? I remember early days of my career, people were telling me, Luigi, you should invest in your weaknesses. Well, I think it's actually now, with insight of many years spending on my weaknesses, was actually another relatively waste of time. I should have spent more time in finding the space where my strength shines more. And so I think that's it was very fascinating. On 2 days ago, I was having one of the prediction tour in dinners in France. And this lady responsible for security of a very large organization, big brand, she's been mentoring a lot of other ladies in their early career. And she said the big things that is missing to them is that boldness and self-confidence to accept that they do have the skills. And so play to their strength. They've been educated to always being kind of doubting themselves. And so I think there's this construct where people that not necessarily have the competencies, and they're all cocky about their capabilities that they don't have. And then we have other people that have a lot of competencies, but they're very shy of showing them. And so I think that to me is a broken behavior. And that's why I think that increase in diversity is critical. Also, and probably for the most important reason, is the criminals are extremely homogeneous in their setup. There are not many women. There are not many international. They don't think differently. They all think the same. And so we could use diversity as the superpower to break the criminal kind of approach in things. We're building, as you said, a very successful company and growing fast. One of the BforeAI superpower, I think, is the multicultural environment. We are fully distributed, 65 people in 24 different countries, 20 plus nationalities. It may seem like chaos, but actually we see problem from so many different angles that the ultimate solution is much more resilient, better. Potentially we see problem that we wouldn't have seen if we were all together in San Francisco, all tech pros, as you were saying. So I think, I'm very passionate about multicultural. I'm Italian. I've lived in France 25 years. My wife is from Belarus. My kids speak 4 languages. I come to the US more often, than I stay in France. The company is multicultural. So for me, obviously, I'm very biased. But I do think that it's an aspect that we underestimate and underinvest. And it actually is an area where, when you do have that diversity, you actually see shine. And I think, what we have said so far kind of points in that direction from different angle, different experience, different people coming in the industry, different mindset with which we should look at it. You think it's, am I getting it right?
Yeah. So with that, you're leading a very broad multinational team. How do you handle something as pervasive as we have in this industry as imposter syndrome?
Well, I think once again is first of all, I'm not sure it can completely be removed, right? One of the things that I've seen, starting with myself, is when you have a high expectation of yourself, when you want to go beyond your limit, when you want to keep owning the problem and solving it and improving yourself, you end up kind of blaming yourself also for things that you shouldn't really blaming yourself for, right? And so that imposter syndrome is kind of a side effect of your willingness to improve constantly. You're never satisfied. And so you're constantly thinking that you're not there yet. Now, I used to be a Formula 3 driver, so car racer. One of the things that stays with me is that I found that there were 2 kinds of drivers. There is the one kind that is more about the racing and more about the competition, more about the showing that they're better than the other guys on the track. And then there is a second category that is more about chronometer, showing that they can go faster, that they can improve the car, they can do better in that corner, getting that apex. So it's not all at all about the other people on the track. It's them, the car, and the chronometer. I was more in this second part, right? And it's a course because you're never satisfied. You can always improve a little bit. But in that sport, at least you do get a chance through the race to eventually see that, yeah, you have improved now so much, you're better than anybody else on track. Yeah. You may not be satisfied in absolute terms, but you are still better than the others. And I think that is where we should find ways to introduce some gaming exercises for the sake of the benchmarking. And this is probably more male than women that will be going after these things. But you do want to have some form of reward scale that you can measure yourself to, right? The benchmark, somebody to aspire to, right? So all of that to say, I'm not sure you should try and remove it. It's going to be there just because it's the other side of the coin of this self-betterment. But you want to tame it with some form of kind of external measure so that you know if you're just being too hard on yourself or not.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful perspective.
Thank you. Well, Joshua, I think, I really enjoyed it. It's been great to chat together. Look forward to read the book and leave you a review. Is it on Amazon? How someone?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure to put a picture and the link in the video so that the audience can put their reviews once they read it. But thanks for your time. Really appreciate it, and look forward